anytime you work with the healing arts and assisting others in their healing, you put yourself at a risk for absorbing some of that residual energy. The quote, the light enters through the womb. The light enters through the womb. So a lot of times that's what has to happen. We can't just be living this type A perfect life where everything looks good on the outside and think that we're going to walk into this idea of faith-based spirituality. We got to kind of get a little broken. We got to get literally cracked open and in need, realize that we are in need of something. And I think that's what happened for me at a really young age. I realized that I needed something that was far beyond anything I had ever experienced. So subconsciously, I probably was already searching.
Oh, yeah.
And just, you know, it just, this is where, like you said, the ancestors guided me. We all have the tools. I know I had the tools. I was implementing the tools. I knew that if they were there if I needed them, but still going with the mindset that this is temporary. You know, our regular we'll be returning to our regularly scheduled programs sooner than later. I hadn't really checked into my tools. You know, I was just kind of like, oh, this is some nice downtime. I like this pace. I have the ability to do some things that I wasn't able to do. I can finish reading this book I've been reading for the past 3 months. I can, you know, take a nap in the middle of the day without feeling rushed because I have to wake up in an hour and run off somewhere. For me, I think initially that was the ease and the comfort of it. So I wasn't really feeling all of the anxiety that I think is starting to kind of creep in. I think when I started really getting into natural and alternative healing, I was also searching for a new spiritual practice. So it all started with me with yoga, to be perfectly honest. I had gotten really sick and I all of a sudden had all of this time. I wasn't able to go back into the office, go back into that field of the hustle and bustle of a 9-to-5 grind. So I had all of this free time as I was going through treatment for my illness. And I was interested in yoga. I heard a lot of good things about it. So it just seemed like the perfect opportunity to make the best of a not so good situation. The yoga practice is what kind of opened my eyes and opened my world, introducing me to other types of spirituality. So for me, it wasn't really a disconnect. Even though I was raised Southern Baptist, I was already kind of moving out of that organized structure of religion and looking for something more spiritual. So the yoga introduced me to the spirituality that, you know, was already resonating within me, just getting in tune with like that inner voice, that inner knowing of that spirit lives within, and then connecting to a higher spirit without, but by getting still, by getting quiet. And then it's just been rolling from there. The yoga certification, and then I took a Reiki certification, so I'm level 2 Reiki. And for me, in this field, I would say the biggest challenge is that people of color haven't really, it's not as mainstream amongst us for all of those reasons that you probably listed, the financial, the spiritual, and then just not knowing, like just not having access to it, not being raised in an environment where, you know, if you have a headache or your monthly is when you have cramps, then they're giving you Motrin. where they're giving you Tylenol, as opposed to saying, well, why don't you drink this tea? Or why don't, you know what I mean? Why don't you schedule acupuncture session? Like, that's not what's rolling off of our tongues as means of therapy. It's always the prescription version, or the and that's become the standard. So for me, it's really a lot of like re-educating, and then once that re-education happens, then opening them up to the idea of this is what that healing could look like, or what that healing could be when you take this route, as opposed to the prescription route. So I think the first time around, I wasn't quite sure what I needed. Well, let's start with the similarities. I think the similarity is that essence of denial that comes up, and kind of just hoping that you'll survive. You know, it's a sense of denial. For me, it was a big sense of denial, and my denial shows up with inaction. So just a lot of I don't necessarily want to say stillness, but like just busy work to be busy, not really being productive, but really just trying to do anything to have a distraction so that I didn't have to face what life was showing me. So with this time around, like I said, that initial denial of, oh, this is just temporary. I'll pick right back up in a couple of weeks. Classes will resume. Reiki will resume. You know what I mean? Like everything will just resume after this mini break. So knowing what I knew then, knowing now what I didn't know back then, is that inaction and that distraction is not, it's not healthy. For one, it doesn't serve me. It actually just makes things harder. So what I'm starting to tap into, as we just received this news of the extension last night, what I'm starting to tap into is my meditation practice, so that the stillness has purpose, so that the stillness is more it becomes more of a remedy, as opposed to just a band-aid to kind of pacify myself. Yeah. And my meditation is sometimes sitting in quiet with, a candle lit or incense burning. And other times it's more of a moving meditation. It's getting out in nature and taking a walk around the block or around the neighborhood, and not having, my music on, and not having a whole, if I'm, walking with my husband, not having a whole lot of conversation, just really allowing that piece of being in nature to be the salve, so to speak, for my spirit. I'll say that my family, it's like two sides of the same coin. On one hand, they're very supportive. They're like, whatever makes this girl happy, whatever keeps her here, keeps her alive. Yeah. I was extremely depressed. So that practice, they saw the shift in me, where I kind of had my joy for life, and you know what I mean. I was much more active and present, and just a better person overall. Even though I was dealing with this really serious and life-threatening condition, I found the reason to continue to live in spite of. So because that's practice was able to bring me back into my own light, what they're like, more power to you. You know, how many times a day can you do yoga? You need a ride. So it was that. But at the same hand, because in the early stages, it was a very lonely thing as well, because I kind of wanted to share it with people. I wanted, to be able to make this, instead of us going out for drinks, let's go to a yoga class. I didn't have that type of camaraderie in the very early stages of it. I wouldn't want to dismiss anyone, because we're all in different places. We all have different responses and different experiences. So, I wouldn't just say, well, Adrienne don't have nothing to say to me right now, or she can't help me. She doesn't understand. And the truth is, you very well may be able to help me. You may have just the word that I need, or just the right recommendation, but I wouldn't want any preconceived notions or any assumptions to block that potential blessing. So I wouldn't say that there's certain people or certain groups of people that I shouldn't be around. What I will say is that I have limited my social media consumption, because that is like the thing that you can't control. What other people post. You can't control what they post, but you can control your consumption of it. And being someone who's very empathetic, and knowing that at this time I probably need to be more empathetic for myself, I don't want to absorb all of the hysteria at times that people tend to post during times like this. Or, the shock factor post, or the real life post of people that are unfortunately catching this virus. People that are surviving, but others close to them aren't. Everybody's reality is going to be different, both during the shift and after. And as healers, we tend to put on the crown of responsibility to assist and aid in those realities. But like I said, where I am, and it's just me, where I am right now in the beginning of this shift, is realizing that I need to build myself up first. I need to guard myself up. You see, I felt like I needed something. So I had to go back and put my crystals on, because if the initial sickness has taught me anything about myself, is that I am not fragile, but delicate and sensitive. And my survival is really steeped in the ways that I support myself first and foremost. Truly grateful for the support system that I have in place, in the form of family, my spouse, my parents, but at the end of the day, my greatest support always comes from within. Again, it always comes back to the benefit is greater than any embarrassment. It's greater than any misunderstanding or miscommunication, things that get lost in translation. Sometimes I've had a practice a comedic practice where the instructor didn't speak. The words weren't necessary. If everyone is there blessed with the ability of sight, all you have to do is watch and feel. Watch the instructor to know what the next pose is, and feel within your body if something needs to be, realigned or moved about in a different way. A whole hour in silence of us just moving and breath. So that taught me that it's not so much about the things that get lost in communication, because a lot of the communication is internal anyway. The same way I'm standing here worried about what they might be thinking or what they might be saying, they're having a whole nother conversation in their minds, wondering what I'm thinking of them, or you know what I mean?
Oh, for sure.
It's just the human nature. But when you eliminate all of that, then again, that's where the magic happens, as they say.
Yeah, that's the practice.
So don't get caught up in it, right? That's the practice.
I think a big part of it is the age that we live in, this age of social media where we're constantly being bombarded with images of us as a people, of Black women, of individuals. We're constantly bombarded with these images while simultaneously trying to create our own avatar, so to speak, our own image that we put forward and we put out there for social media consumption. But when the cameras are off and, when the computer is down and the laptop is put away, it's like, do you still really know who you are? Or, are you really that avatar, or are you somebody totally different? And how do you balance the two? So for me, that's why, and also, again, being in the line of work that we're in, anytime I feel that anytime you work with the healing arts and assisting others in their healing, you put yourself at a risk for absorbing some of that residual energy and not claiming it as good, bad, light, dark, or anything. Just putting yourself out there to potentially absorb some of it, which will then cloud your vision or cloud your understanding sometimes of yourself. You got to realize, is this mine? Am I feeling like this, or is this something else that I picked up? And that's not just in the healing world. I think we just may be more aware of it. But anytime you go out in public, or you're out and around other people outside of like your own sacred space that you've created. So it became really important for me to define myself so that I can constantly know who it is that I'm checking in with, who it is that I am, calling on, whether I'm out in the world or whether I'm posting a video. I think if you don't define yourself, when things like this happen, when shifts take place socially, when, excuse me, when shifts take place internally, if you don't have a foundation, it's almost kind of like you're just free falling. And the initial shift that I went through dealing with that illness that's exactly what it felt like. It felt like I was free falling. I didn't know who to call on. I didn't know how I was supposed to respond. I didn't know, I didn't know. I didn't have that foundation. And I think we kind of touched on this before. That's when the search for a spiritual practice came into play. So having gone through that and having gotten really solid in my spiritual practice, that's what established my my foundation of who I am and who I strive to be. Because even as we grow, that's going to change, that's going to evolve, but there's still some base level things, you know, that have to be solid. And that's a part of what my definition is. No matter how much I grow, no matter how much I change and evolve, I'm always going to be this essence of a woman, this essence of a spirit that is gentle and sensitive, and, you know, all the other things that really make up who I am at my core.
My grandmother played a huge role in raising me. So we were at church every Sunday from the time I was born.
Okay.
And even when my mom and I moved out of my grandmother's house and, you know, moved out to the suburbs, I was still going to my grandmother's house on the weekends so that we could be at church on Sunday. And that went on for like the first 16 years of my life. And then I started visiting my friend's church, and then it was just kind of like a social thing. It wasn't so much for the word. It was like, all right, I know this is what I'm supposed to do, but let's see if I can have fun while doing it.
Okay.
As an adult, you know, once I got into like my early 20s, what I felt was I'm really just showing up for the songs. I'm really just showing up for the choir. Because when the pastor is speaking, I got so many questions that I feel I'm not finding the answers to on my own. And then as life really, really began to kick my ass and just really start to unfold, what I found was going to church, to me, made me feel like I was giving my power away. It made me feel very helpless. And when you're dealing with a chronic condition or autoimmune or whatever, you already feel helpless. You already feel like your body, the one thing that you own and have autonomy over, is betraying you. So I really believe the yoga opened me up because it brought me back into my body, so I didn't feel so betrayed and so disconnected, and it gave me my power back. I didn't have to hear a pastor say, well, do this, and then you'll be fine.
Wow.
Or drink this blood and eat this body, and then you'll be healed. Like, I didn't have to hear that to feel what I needed to feel. And that was the key. That was, like, really the transformation. Like, yo, this whole thing might be... might have been hoodwinked for grand. Do you know about this?
Wow.
Yeah.
So, again, as I continue to grow and evolve, what I realize is that everybody goes to their house of worship for something different. Some do go for the community, for the familiarity of being able to see the same faces every week. It's like a family. Some do go because within those organizations they have roles, and so it gives them purpose. They're on the usher board. They're the choir director. They're the, you know what I mean? They're the hostess. They have a sense of purpose
Community.
and that sense of duty.
And community, like you said.
And community, right. But once you strip all those titles and all those legs, so I was never into that. I didn't have the titles, and I had a community outside of church, so it's like I didn't need all of that. What I needed was a spiritual practice. I needed a spiritual connection that I could do outside of Sunday morning. And so that's what the yoga kind of gave me, that ritual. And then I built on it myself, and I got into candles, and I got into herbs, and I got into, well, the African spirituality is something totally different. And so, you know, it just really opened me up. And the more I was open, the more I started to become comfortable in the differences from where I was raised, from, you know, how I was raised in that church setting to where I am now.
Yeah.
Only time I go to church now is a wedding or a funeral.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that. I don't feel guilty, because then that's the other thing. You get open, but now it's all of this guilt of, this isn't what I was taught to do. This isn't what my grandmother, this isn't what my mother still does. You know, this is, the Bible says you're going to hell if you don't do this, that, and the third, or the Quran says. So it's really building you up to have that sense of self and that sense of true faith. True faith in the unseen. You're not going to church every Sunday. You're totally unseen as far as who the pastor is, or the leader, or your spiritual leader. The spiritual leader becomes you.
And it's funny because we are right now in this moment, we are being forced to isolate, to take some distance, some social distancing away from other humans and their stuff. And so it gives you this opportunity to really kind of sit and recognize, well, hold up, maybe some of that was my stuff. What have I contributed to that social structure of stress, or anxiety or mistrust? How have I contributed to that, and what can I do to make sure that I'm no longer a player in that field? At least for me, that's what I'm realizing, is that my time away from others made me kind of see them in different lights and see our interaction and my state of mind and my state of peace with them and without them.